Hello students, welcome to K2 Institute. So today we are going to continue our chapter number 4 of class 12 polity, which is the international organization. So up till now we have so far covered about the United Nations, about the structure of the United Nations, and about the major reforms that the member countries want in the United Nations. Right? We have already seen the countries that are supporting the reforms and the countries that are against these reforms. Okay. Then in the previous lecture we have covered about the stand of India on the United Nations reforms, like what India has to say about the changes in the United Nations. And in the reforms also majorly we have discussed about the Security Council and its permanent membership, right? So up to now we have covered all these things. So today in this lecture we are going to start a new topic, which is the United Nations in a unipolar world. So we have already discussed in our previous lectures, in our previous chapters, about the Cold War, right? About the Cold War. So let me just summarize what Cold War was. So in Cold War there were two countries. Okay, one was your USA and the other one was your USSR. So it was a war of ideology, right? USSR was supporting the communist form of government, whereas USA was supporting the capitalist form of economy, right? So eventually all the countries were aligning themselves either with USA or with USSR, right? But in the end we saw that ultimately the USSR or the Soviet Union got collapsed, right? So we can say the winner of this entire Cold War was USA. Up till now the world was considered to be as the bipolar world, but after the Cold War we can see, because USSR has already collapsed, so now we can see the world was moving towards a unipolar world. Unipolar world. If you are not able to understand these terms and particularly this Cold War, so please I would suggest you to go back to the previous lectures and have your concepts clear, right? So after the Cold War period, only one country was the one which was very powerful, okay, and that was your USA. So in that particular phase, in that time, it was really necessary to counter this power of USA, and that power was considerably given a challenge by this United Nations, okay, to counter the emerging power of US, to stop the US hegemony in the international affairs. This organization was the need of the hour, right? So let's read it. So among the concerns about the reforms and structuring, we have already discussed that this entire chapter is revolving around the reforms and restructuring. All the countries want some reform, and the restructuring of the United Nations we have discussed it in really detail. Okay. So now, other than all these problems, all these major issues, all these concerns in the United Nations, UN has definitely played a important role. And what was that important role? So UN has, it has enabled to cope better with the unipolar world, in which US was the most powerful country. So in order to deal with the growing power of US, UN has been playing an important role. Now, can the UN serve as a balance against US dominance? So, if we are saying that UN was formed in order to deal with the growing power of USA, or the main purpose was not to deal with USA in fact, but we can say that UN has played an important role, right? But how can we say that UN has been serving to balance against the US dominance? Is it actually, able? Has been it able? Can it help maintain a dialogue between the rest of the world and the US and prevent America from doing whatever it wants? So there are so many questions that you must be thinking, that does the UN actually provide a platform to have a dialogue between the entire rest of the world and US, to prevent US from doing what it wants, to prevent the US from establishing its dominance over the remaining country of the world? Okay, so these are the questions that you must be asking. So US power cannot be easily checked. So eventually we all know that US is very powerful and its power cannot be checked. It cannot be, restricted, or we cannot put a check or balance on its power. First of all, with the disappearance of the Soviet Union, we all know that US emerged as the single most superpower in this entire world. Its military and economic power allow it to ignore the UN or any other international organization. See, United Nations is existing since 1945, right? After the World War II. After the World War II. And this Cold War period that we are talking about, it is majorly around 1960, right? So that means United Nations has been existing before the Cold War period, right? And also we had discussed that USSR was a part of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council previously. And then after USSR, when USSR collapsed, the seat was given to Russia. So by this you must be, understanding that United Nations was existing since a very early period of time, right? So after the Cold War period, US was very powerful that everyone was expecting कि भाई US can actually US can actually ignore the United Nations because there are no restrictions on United States to be a part to be a member of United Nations. Why would US want to remain in an international organization when it is self sufficient? US has, a great military, a great economic power, right? So US significantly does not require any other country support. So everyone was fearing, everyone has this fear that US might, back out from the United Nations. US would not require any kind of military alliance or any kind of grouping, any kind of global level cooperation, right? Because US is very powerful. Secondly, within the UN, the influence of US is considerable. Now, second most important thing is that we already know that in the UN also, because the UN is made up of its member, and out of these members, the most important member of the United Nations is USA. So there is a considerable influence of the United States in the United Nations. So probably that can be the reason why US is still a part of United Nations, right? India is the US is the second single largest contributor to the United Nations. Okay, so the working of the United Nations, the salary, the allowances, the infrastructure. So majorly USA has been the one who is contributing for the United Nations budget. It is the largest one. Okay, other countries are also there who are contributing, but again US is the largest one. And US has unmatched financial power. We all know US key financial power. The fact that the UN is physically located within the US territory, and along with that, we all know that major headquarters of the United Nations, they all are situated in Washington DC, right, which is your US. So of course, the US would be having an edge over the other countries by being a member of the United Nations. Okay, so it can directly influence the United Nations. Okay, and also there are so many US nationals, that means the citizens of US who are a part of UN bureaucracy. So again, US has some sort of influence. Okay, in addition, with its veto power, then the most important in this entire chapter, we have been just discussing about this veto only, right? Entire conflict is because of this veto power only. So US have this veto power, and with this veto power, what US can do? So UN can actually stop any move that it finds annoying or damaging to its interest. If if USA को लगता है कि this particular decision is against the interest of US, then it can put a halt to it. It can put a halt to that decision, right? By using that veto power. And ऐसा नहीं है कि US has never used its veto power. US has, so many times used it. Okay. So the US can and does use this power to split the rest of the world and to reduce the opposition to its policy. So what US is doing? So US actually split the entire world by using its veto power to reduce the opposition to its policy. So if some country is opposing the policy of United States, then US will use its discretionary powers. Okay, the UN is not there for a great balance to the US. So we can easily say that UN is not, you know, able. UN has not been able to significantly balance out the growing power of US. But certainly it is important. It is it is playing an important role. Nevertheless, in a unipolar world in which US is dominant, the UN can has served to bring the US and the rest of the world onto discussion over various issues. So despite of all these major issues, concerns, we cannot deny that UN has been playing a significant role in bringing all the countries together on a single platform to discuss, to have some dialogues, to negotiate on the major issues, right? So certainly we can say UN has been doing a great job. There has been a famous quote, if I'm not wrong, given by Shashi Tharoor. It is better to have jaw rather than having go-go. That means it is better to have dialogues and discussions rather than having go-go. That means war. Okay. And other statement was given by some diplomat of Russia. I don't exactly remember, but he had the story. He said, in the Garden of Eden, in the Garden of Eden, Adam asked Eve, because Eve was not behaving properly, Eve was not giving much importance to Adam. So Adam asked to Eve if she is looking someone else, if she is thinking about everyone, somebody else, if there is anyone else in her life. So Eve just smiled and said, in this Garden of Eden, do you think there is anyone else other than you and me? So same goes with United Nations. In this entire world, if there is any international organization that can bring the countries together on a single platform, then that is UN. You cannot criticize it, because other than UN, there is no other single institution for this purpose, right? So ultimately, you will have to, acknowledge the work that UN is doing. Okay. Next is, okay, so US leaders, in spite of their frequent criticism of the UN, do see the organization as serving a purpose in bringing together over 190 nations. So definitely, despite of all these criticism, UN has been serving its purpose of bringing all the countries together, and they have been dealing with different social and economic issues related to the development of the different countries, right? And as for the rest of the world, UN provides an arena in which it is possible to modify US attitudes and policies. And somewhere, if US is having an edge or having an influence, but somewhere it has to accept other countries' point also. At least we have a platform where we can make US consider the concerns of the rest of the world, right? Well, the rest of the world is really united against Washington, and while it is virtually impossible to balance US power, see, it is not like that the entire world is against United Nations. No, it is not like that. There are so many countries that supports US when it comes to a particular conflict in the United Nations regarding any decision. There are so many countries that actually backs up US. Okay, so it is never US versus the entire world. Okay, there is always, a group of countries that would support US no matter what. See, okay, so the UN does provide a space within which arguments against specific US attitudes and policies are heard, and compromise and concessions can be shaped. So of course, UN has been providing a platform where all the major concerns, all the major issues can be put, and we can actually change the attitude of USA. We can actually raise our concerns so that US could amend its policies, could alter its policies. Okay, the matter of concern would be heard. Okay, and some concessions could be shaped. So UN is giving that platform. Okay, UN is an imperfect body. Definitely nothing can be perfect in this imperfect world. So goes with the UN also. UN is an imperfect body, but without it, world would be worse off. Okay, we accept UN is an imperfect body, but without UN, world will be worse off. और भी ज़्यादा बेकार हो जाएगा, right? So, given the growing connections and links between the societies and issues, what we often call interdependence, it is hard to imagine how far than 7 billion people would live together without an organization such as the UN. Now, we all know due to this globalization, the world has been interconnected. Each and every country is interdependent on each other, right? No country is living in a complete seclusion. We all are dependent on other countries in some way or other way. So it is really very hard to imagine how these 7 billion people, the entire population of this world, 7 billion people, how would they live without a particular organization who would be cooperating, who would be, giving a platform to have some dialogues and discussions. So it is really impossible to imagine this entire world without such organization like UN. So UN is certainly very important in today's context. Technology promises to increase the planetary interdependence, and therefore the importance of the UN will only increase, right? So now with the coming of or the introduction of so many new technologies, right, we can only expect that this interdependence will be growing in the near future. Okay, this globalization will be becoming more stronger and stronger in the near future. So for that purpose, certainly UN is required. Okay. People and government will have to find ways of supporting and using the United Nations and other international organizations in ways that are consistent with their own interests and interests of the international community more broadly. So now what is the option that the countries are left with? So we cannot criticize UN. Definitely we can, raise our concerns regarding the structure and regarding the reforms, but definitely we cannot criticize UN. Okay, what the government can do of different countries? So the government of different countries can actually try to accommodate, try to bring some ways that are inconsistent, that are that are consistent with their own interest. Okay, and interest of the international community as well. So all the countries, all the major political parties will have to come together, will have to